Who does this vehicle belong to? You don't look like the owner.
It's mine.
I'm gonna need to search it.
Do you have probable cause?
Step back. Don't make this difficult.
I'm Dr. Anthony Shaw, administrator of the DEA.
This is a federal vehicle.
At 3:18 p.m. in a gated neighborhood outside a major U.S. city, a patrol officer believed he'd just found something worth seizing. The SUV was spotless, unmarked, expensive. The driver didn't argue, didn't rush, didn't explain himself. That calm only made the officer more suspicious. From the moment the lights flashed, the questions weren't about speed or traffic violations. They were about ownership, about money, about how someone like him could afford a vehicle like that. The officer pressed for a search, hinted at cash, suggested contraband. What he didn't realize was that the man standing in front of him wasn't hiding anything. He was protecting something. Because this wasn't a luxury SUV, it was a secure federal vehicle. And the person the officer was about to detain wasn't a suspect. He was the administrator of the entire Drug Enforcement Administration. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, hit subscribe. Stories like these only matter when people see how power actually collapses. The neighborhood sat in an affluent suburb approximately 12 miles from downtown. Gated entries controlled access. Tree-lined streets wound through properties valued between $2 and $8 million. The kind of area where police presence was typically minimal. Calls were usually about minor disputes or false alarms triggered by expensive security systems. Residents paid for privacy. They expected discretion. They expected that law enforcement would be respectful of the distinction between their neighborhood and others. Marcus Shaw was driving home from a secured federal facility in a 2024 Cadillac Escalade. The vehicle was unmarked, no government plates, no insignia, no indication of official use. That was intentional, deliberate federal protocol. High-level operational commanders required discreet transportation, nothing that announced federal presence, nothing that compromised security, nothing that advertised authority. Shaw was 58 years old, 32 years with the DEA. He had worked his way through every level of the organization with deliberate precision. Field agent in Miami in the 1990s, supervisor of a regional task force, regional director overseeing 5 states, associate deputy administrator at the national level. Now, for the past 2 years, he held the position of administrator, the highest operational authority in the entire Drug Enforcement Administration. He answered to the Deputy Attorney General. He oversaw approximately 9,000 employees across 56 countries. His operational decisions affected federal narcotics enforcement policy worldwide. He had just finished a classified briefing with his executive team about ongoing operations spanning 6 countries and multiple continents. The briefing involved sensitive intelligence about international drug trafficking networks. The information was compartmentalized. The details were restricted to the highest security clearance levels. His personal security detail was minimal but present. 2 federal agents positioned at a distance that allowed him freedom of movement while maintaining protective oversight. They were experienced. They understood the balance between security and operational discretion. At 3:18 p.m., Marcus Shaw was approaching a traffic light on Meridian Street when he noticed red and blue lights activate behind him in his rearview mirror. The lights were unmistakable, sudden, authoritative, a traffic stop. He had done nothing wrong. He wasn't speeding. He had maintained consistent speed in the residential zone. He wasn't weaving between lanes. He wasn't making illegal turns. He wasn't violating any traffic laws. He was simply driving home from work in a vehicle he owned personally, purchased with his accumulated salary over 2 years, registered under his name with complete documentation, insured appropriately through a standard commercial provider. He pulled over smoothly into a residential area near the entrance to the neighborhood. The patrol car pulled in behind him, lights still flashing, creating a scene visible to anyone in the surrounding homes. The patrol car's engine remained running. The officer didn't immediately exit the vehicle. Shaw waited. After approximately 45 seconds, the officer emerged from the vehicle. His hand rested casually on his belt near his duty weapon. He moved toward the driver's side window with the practiced gait of someone conducting dozens of traffic stops each month. This was routine for him, automatic. His body cam activated automatically when he stepped out of the patrol car, standard protocol for all traffic interactions. Shaw lowered his window. He kept his hands visible on the steering wheel, exactly as he had been trained in federal protocol. He understood the dynamics of traffic stops. He understood how authority functioned at the local level. He understood that this was a moment that could escalate or de-escalate, depending on how he responded. The officer was James Kowalski, 43 years old, 11 years on the force. He had been with the police department since 2013. His service record showed no complaints filed. His conduct reviews were satisfactory. He had completed state-mandated training on civil rights and constitutional protections. He was considered an adequate officer by departmental standards. "Good afternoon," Shaw said. His voice was even, respectful, the tone of someone who understood that courtesy could diffuse tension. "License and registration," Kowalski said. No greeting, no explanation for the stop, no statement of why he had activated his lights, just demands issued with the authority of someone who expected obedience. Shaw reached over slowly and retrieved his registration from the glove compartment. The movement was deliberate and visible. He wasn't reaching for anything else, wasn't concealing his movements. He removed his license from his wallet. He held both documents and handed them through the window without comment. Kowalski looked at the license, then at Shaw, then at the vehicle, examining it through the window. His expression shifted slightly, a tightening around the eyes. His jaw moved. Something about what he was seeing, or who he was seeing, had triggered a response. "This your car?" he asked. His tone carried skepticism, the kind of disbelief that suggested he didn't believe the answer before Shaw provided it. "Yes," Shaw said simply. Kowalski examined the registration. The document confirmed that the vehicle was registered to Marcus Shaw at a residential address in the gated neighborhood. Everything was accurate. Everything was in order. "You own this?" he asked. His voice had changed. It carried doubt now, not the casual skepticism of a routine stop, but something more pointed, something that suggested he didn't believe that the man in front of him could legitimately own such a vehicle. "I do," Shaw said. His voice remained calm, measured, exactly the kind of composed demeanor that, in Shaw's experience, would be interpreted as suspicious by some officers. Composure sometimes triggered more suspicion rather than less. Remaining calm was sometimes read as having something to hide. "Where'd you get the money for this?" Kowalski asked. The question wasn't about the stop anymore. It wasn't about traffic violations. It was about wealth, about how it was obtained, about whether it was legitimate. Shaw didn't immediately answer. He understood what was happening. He had prosecuted cases in his youth before joining the DEA. He understood the assumptions that guided some police interactions. "I'm asking how you purchased this vehicle," Kowalski repeated, as if Shaw hadn't heard the question. "Financing? Cash? Where'd the money come from?" "From a dealership, through normal purchasing, with a finance agreement." Kowalski circled the vehicle, walking slowly around the perimeter while his body cam captured the pristine condition of the SUV. No dents, no scratches, no wear. Recent model year. All maintenance current. The kind of vehicle someone with significant financial resources would purchase and maintain meticulously. The vehicle was immaculate. He returned to the driver's side window. "Nice car," he said. "Really nice. How much you spend on this?" $87,000, Shaw said. "Why are you asking?" "Just curious," Kowalski said, but there was nothing casual about the curiosity. "Not many people afford a car like this through normal means. Usually involves some kind of activity that brings significant income, narcotics, illegal enterprises, that sort of thing. Drug trafficking operations, money laundering, that's typically how people end up with vehicles this nice at your age. Shaw understood immediately and completely what was happening. He had seen this before in his career, the assumption that wealth, particularly in the hands of a black man, indicated criminality, the automatic conflation of financial success with illegal activity, the implicit accusation that his prosperity was a red flag rather than the result of decades of professional work. I am a federal employee. My income is public record. My salary supports this purchase. It's not complicated. A federal employee, Kowalski repeated, drawing the words out as if they were suspicious in themselves. Doing exactly what exactly? Federal employee covers a lot. Could be anything. Could be something that explains how you got the cash for this. Shaw hesitated. His position was classified to a degree that went beyond normal confidentiality. His operational details were not appropriate for discussion with a local patrol officer who had initiated a stop without articulating any legal justification. His command responsibilities were sensitive. His daily activities involved classified information. I work for a federal agency, Shaw said. My employment is documented. My background has been vetted at the highest security level. That's all I can appropriately discuss. Federal agency, DEA, FBI, ATF, immigration, which one? I'm not required to answer that question, and I'd like to know the traffic violation that prompted this stop. Kowalski was quiet for a moment. His body cam captured his expression tightening. I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle, he said. For what reason? Shaw asked. You haven't cited a traffic violation. You've asked me questions about my employment and my vehicle ownership, but you haven't stated a legal basis for this stop or a reason to remove me from my vehicle. I'm asking you to exit the vehicle, Kowalski repeated, his tone harder now. That's a lawful order. You can comply, or we can make this complicated. Your choice.
Shaw unbuckled his seatbelt. He opened the door and stepped out. He kept his movements slow and deliberate. He kept his hands visible on his sides. He understood the dynamics of this situation better than almost anyone in law enforcement. He had trained officers. He had overseen civil rights compliance. He had reviewed cases of unjustified stops. He knew the protocol. Kowalski directed Shaw to stand near the front of the SUV, away from the door where he had limited ability to retreat. Shaw complied. The body cam captured the positioning. Shaw standing in open space in his home neighborhood, standing in a location where neighbors could see him, standing with his hands visible while a police officer maintained control of the vehicle and the interaction. You carrying any contraband in this vehicle? Kowalski asked. The word contraband was specific. It suggested drugs. It suggested weapons. It suggested something illegal. No, Shaw said. You transporting any cash, any large amounts? No, Shaw said. Any narcotics, any controlled substances, any pharmaceutical medications not in a pharmacy container? No, Shaw said. Kowalski walked around the vehicle again, examining windows for visibility into the interior, examining the condition of the tires and wheels, examining the exterior trim and panels, performing the systematic visual inspection of someone searching for justification. A federal employee with a vehicle like this, keeping it in pristine condition, driving home from somewhere at mid-afternoon? Kowalski said. Lot of people involved in lucrative criminal enterprises have similar patterns, similar vehicles, similar attitudes about their assets. They maintain their vehicles because they're using them to project status, to show success, to indicate that they're doing well financially. That's a known indicator. I'm not involved in any criminal enterprise, Shaw said. You've asked me directly. I've answered directly. I'm exercising my right to refuse further questioning. You wouldn't tell me if you were. That's the thing about this. I need to verify independently. I'm going to need to search the vehicle. "Do you have probable cause?" Shaw asked. Kowalski's jaw tightened. He was silent for a moment. "The condition of the vehicle, your evasiveness about your employment, your possession of significant assets, your presence in this neighborhood, these are all indicators," Kowalski said. "Those aren't indicators of probable cause," Shaw said. His voice remained calm, but there was an edge now, an awareness that he was dealing with someone determined to fabricate justification for an illegal search. Probable cause requires specific, articulable facts that suggest criminal activity. Owning a nice vehicle is not a crime, not in this country. Refusing to provide personal employment details is not suspicious. It's a constitutional right. Remaining calm during a traffic stop is not evasive behavior. It's the appropriate response. "I'm asking for your consent to search," Kowalski said. "I don't consent. I explicitly decline consent to search. You can document that I have refused consent. Your refusal is suspicious. If you have nothing to hide, you wouldn't object to a simple search. Law-abiding citizens cooperate." "Law-abiding citizens also have Fourth Amendment rights," Shaw said. "I'm declining consent. That's my right. I'm not obstructing anything. I'm exercising Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable search." Kowalski was silent for a moment longer. His body cam captured his expression hardening, the moment when frustration turned into something else, into determination, into the decision that he would proceed regardless of the response he received. "I'm going to search this vehicle," he said. "You can cooperate or not, your choice, but I will search it." "You don't have probable cause," Shaw said. "Searching without probable cause or consent would be an illegal search. Any evidence discovered would be inadmissible, and you would be in violation of federal civil rights statutes regarding unlawful detention and unreasonable search." "I'll be the judge of what's legal," Kowalski said. "I've been doing this 11 years. I know what suspicious looks like, and this looks suspicious. Everything about this situation looks suspicious." He reached toward the door handle of the SUV.
Shaw raised his hand. "Stop," he said. His voice was firm, but not raised. "I need to show you something." Kowalski paused. His hand froze on the door handle. "I'm reaching for my credentials," Shaw said. "Federal credentials. Please don't misinterpret my movement. I'm reaching for my jacket pocket. Slowly." He moved his hand with exaggerated deliberation, understanding the dynamics of the moment, understanding that sudden movements could be misinterpreted, understanding that this was a critical juncture where miscommunication could create serious consequences. He retrieved a leather credential case from his jacket, federal seal embossed on the front in gold. The case was worn from years of use. It was clearly official. He opened it slowly. The badge was visible. Federal, official, gold and silver with the distinctive DEA seal. The photograph inside matched the man standing in front of Kowalski. The name read Marcus Shaw. The title read Administrator, Drug Enforcement Administration. The credential was current, valid. Everything about it was authentic. Kowalski's face went completely blank. His hand dropped from the door handle. His entire posture changed, not into deference, but into something closer to shock. The realization that the situation had shifted in ways he couldn't control. The understanding that he had made a catastrophic miscalculation. "I am the administrator of the Drug Enforcement Administration," Shaw said calmly. His voice remained steady and measured. "This vehicle is a secure federal vehicle used for my official duties. You are currently in violation of federal statutes regarding obstruction of federal operations. You have detained a federal officer without legal justification. You have attempted to fabricate justification for an illegal search, and you have done all of this while I remained calm, compliant, and cooperative." A second vehicle pulled up behind the patrol vehicle. Two federal agents, part of Shaw's security detail, emerged and approached Kowalski's patrol car. They weren't aggressive, they were professional. Their identification was visible, their authority was clear, their presence was unmistakable.
This interaction is now being documented by federal security personnel. Your body cam footage is being retained as evidence of federal civil rights violations. Your patrol vehicle's in-car camera footage is being secured, and this matter is being reported to the highest levels of federal law enforcement authority. The FBI's Civil Rights Division will be conducting a parallel investigation. Kowalski's supervisor, Captain David Rodriguez, arrived within 8 minutes. Rodriguez understood immediately from the federal presence what had occurred. He had been on the force for 22 years. He knew the protocol for federal involvement. He knew the implications. He pulled Kowalski aside and spoke to him in low, urgent tones, while Shaw remained standing near his vehicle, calmly but visibly separate from the interaction. Rodriguez's face showed the strain of understanding the magnitude of what had just occurred under his officer's command. Federal agents took custody of Kowalski's body cam. They took Kowalski's patrol vehicle's in-car camera footage. They photographed Kowalski's uniform and weapon. They documented the exact location of the traffic stop, the time, 3:18 p.m., the duration, 11 minutes and 43 seconds, and the complete absence of any articulated traffic violation that had preceded the stop.
They interviewed Shaw on scene, taking a comprehensive statement about the interaction. They obtained his security details observations. They documented the condition of his vehicle and the legitimacy of his registration. Within 12 minutes, calls were being made to the police department's chain of command. The chief of police was notified by Captain Rodriguez. The city's legal department was notified by the chief of police. The city manager was notified. By 3:47 p.m., the DEA's Inspector General office had been contacted directly by Shaw's federal security detail. By 4:05 p.m., the FBI's Civil Rights Division had received formal notification. By 4:15 p.m., the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Section had been contacted. Kowalski was removed from the traffic stop and placed in his patrol car. He was driven back to the police station without being read his rights. He wasn't under arrest, but he was effectively detained for questioning. His badge was secured. His weapon was secured. He was placed on immediate administrative leave pending investigation. Shaw was escorted back to his vehicle by federal agents. The security detail confirmed the integrity of the vehicle. No tampering, no damage, no evidence collection performed. Shaw was driven home in a follow-up vehicle while federal personnel documented everything about the initial traffic stop. Photographs, measurements, the exact location where he had stood, the trajectory of Kowalski's sight lines. The body cam footage showed exactly what had occurred: the casual racism, the assumption of criminality based on wealth and race, the pressure for a search without legal justification, the refusal to accept legitimate reasons for declining to provide more information, the repeated returns to the vehicle's condition as evidence of suspicion. All of it documented, all of it recorded, all of it preserved as evidence of bias and civil rights violation. Internal Affairs opened an investigation into James Kowalski before he even returned to the police station. The investigation focused on this single interaction, but investigators immediately began pulling his complete record. They reviewed his previous traffic stops systematically. They examined patterns in his stops over the past 11 years of employment. What they found was striking and systematic. Over the past 3 years specifically, 73% of Kowalski's traffic stops involved black drivers. Over the past 5 years, the percentage was 68%. Of the stops involving black drivers, only 18% resulted in citations or warnings. 37% resulted in searches being requested without probable cause. Of those searches for which documentation existed, drug paraphernalia or cash was allegedly discovered in 40% of cases. The pattern suggested that Kowalski's searches were targeting specific demographics and that when documentation was unavailable or incomplete, he had discretion to claim discoveries that may not have actually occurred. The pattern suggested systematic bias. Internal Affairs submitted its initial findings within 5 days. The investigation was thorough and detailed. The conclusion was unambiguous that Kowalski had engaged in bias-based policing, unlawful detention of citizens, violation of Fourth Amendment rights, and conduct unbecoming of an officer.
By the end of the second week, James Kowalski was terminated from the police department. The termination letter, more than 3 pages long, cited pattern bias in stop selection, violation of use of force policies, violation of civil rights protections, false statements in police reports, and conduct inconsistent with department values. His police certification was revoked by the state licensing board. The revocation was permanent. He would never work in law enforcement again. Any future employment would have to disclose the reason for his police decertification. Any background check would reveal the civil rights violations he had committed. Marcus Shaw filed a federal lawsuit against the city on personal grounds, not on behalf of the DEA. The lawsuit was filed in federal district court. It cited unlawful detention, violation of civil rights under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983, Fourth Amendment violations, and deliberate indifference to constitutional protections. The lawsuit specifically mentioned the pattern of bias evident in Kowalski's stop record over his employment history. The city's legal department immediately entered settlement negotiations. They understood the exposure. They understood the precedent a trial would create. They understood that litigating against the administrator of the DEA in federal court would be not just costly, but potentially devastating to the city's reputation and finances. Within 3 weeks, a settlement agreement was reached for $847,000. The settlement included no admission of liability from the city, standard language in such agreements. The settlement required mandatory training for all patrol officers on civil rights protections, Fourth Amendment requirements, and bias recognition. The settlement established a community oversight board to review patterns in traffic stops across the department. The police department released a brief public statement. "We have completed our investigation into a traffic stop conducted on October 15th. The officer involved in the stop has been terminated from employment. The department remains committed to professional conduct and constitutional compliance. We have implemented enhanced training and oversight mechanisms to prevent similar incidents in the future." No officer was named publicly. No details of the settlement were disclosed. No details of the allegations were specified. The statement was designed to limit damage while appearing responsive to the incident.
The story made regional news. Local media outlets reported federal officials subjected to unlawful traffic stop by local police. The coverage was brief and factual. The DEA issued no public statement regarding the incident. Marcus Shaw declined media interviews. His office emphasized that the matter was resolved and that they were moving forward. What wasn't reported publicly in any comprehensive way was the operational security complication the incident had created. Shaw's secured vehicle had been identified by a local police officer. The secure travel patterns from federal facilities to his residence had been compromised. Federal security protocols had to be reassessed. Alternative routes were established. New vehicles were arranged. The incident, while resolved quickly at the legal and administrative levels, had created lasting complications in ongoing federal operations. Resources that should have been dedicated to narcotics enforcement had to be redirected to security concerns. The broader pattern that the internal affairs investigation had identified wasn't addressed comprehensively by the settlement or the termination. How many other drivers had been stopped based on asset suspicion? How many searches had been conducted without probable cause? How many cases had been prosecuted based on alleged discoveries that may have been fabricated or that came from illegal searches? The city ordered a comprehensive audit of traffic stops from the past 5 years. The audit examined records from all patrol officers in the jurisdiction. It looked for patterns similar to those identified in Kowalski's record. The audit identified 147 stops by 6 different officers that showed similar patterns, similar demographics, similar search requests without articulated probable cause, similar alleged discoveries of contraband or cash. Of those 147 stops, 43 had resulted in arrests. Those 43 cases were reviewed systematically. 5 were identified as having evidence of constitutional violations. The individuals in those cases were offered the opportunity to have their convictions vacated if they wished to pursue it. 2 individuals accepted and had their convictions overturned. One had served 18 months in county jail on a drug possession conviction based on alleged evidence discovered during an unlawful search. He was released. He sued the city separately. That settlement was sealed and confidential. The other 3 individuals chose to remain convicted despite the identified constitutional violations. They believed that the cost of relitigation, the uncertainty of new trials, and the potential for continued prosecution made fighting the conviction more risky than accepting it. One individual who did accept had spent 18 months in county jail on a drug possession conviction based on alleged evidence discovered during an unlawful search. He was released immediately. He sued the city separately. That settlement was sealed and confidential. The amount was never disclosed. He was provided expungement of his record and was reinstated to his previous employment. The broader conversation about asset-based racial profiling didn't emerge from this incident in any sustained public way. The conversation about how wealth, particularly in the hands of people of color, triggers criminal suspicion from authority figures didn't become a public priority in policing reform discussions. What changed was specific and limited. One officer was terminated. One settlement was paid. One city implemented additional oversight. One set of cases was reviewed. One federal official had his civil rights vindicated. But the question remained unanswered. How many identical stops occur every day across the country where no federal credential is revealed, where the driver simply complies with an illegal search because they don't understand their rights, where the constitutional violation passes undocumented and unaddressed, where the system functions exactly as Kowalski believed it should, with authority unchecked and compliance assumed? Marcus Shaw returned to his work at the DEA. His operational security was reassessed. His travel protocols were modified. His security detail was expanded. He continued his duties as administrator, aware that this incident, this single traffic stop in a gated neighborhood lasting 11 minutes and 43 seconds, had exposed vulnerabilities in federal operational security and had forced a painful reckoning with the reality of how race and wealth intersected in law enforcement interactions. The vehicle remained in his personal possession. He continued to drive it. He understood that the stop, while resolved, had demonstrated how assumptions about wealth and race could override training, policy, and constitutional protections. He understood that he had been privileged by his federal position. He understood that most people didn't have that privilege. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. And if this story showed you something about asset-based profiling and the assumption that wealth equals guilt, hit subscribe, because what happens when silence is mistaken for weakness matters. It matters when federal authority has to assert itself against local law enforcement making unfounded assumptions. It matters when wealth, in certain hands, is treated as inherent guilt. And it matters most when the person being stopped has the power to hold the system accountable, because most people don't. This story ended with justice because one man had federal credentials and federal resources. But that raises the hardest question. What happens to everyone else? What happens to the person without credentials, without federal protection, without the resources to sue, without the institutional power to trigger investigations? That's where the real story is, and that's the story that doesn't get told until someone with power decides it's worth telling. See you in the next one.